Hey guys, this week on Helping Parents Win, we talk with Dr. Sean McDowell, who is a gifted communicator with a passion for equipping the church. He has spoken for organizations including Focus on the Family, FCA, and Christian Schools International. Sean brings a unique perspective to our topic of education and discipleship as a pastor, high school teacher, and a college professor. We hope you enjoy this talk with Dr. Sean McDowell.
All right. All right, Sean, tell me some of the tips you'd have for people who have never had to educate kids and teens from their home.
Well, I gotta be honest, I haven't had to educate teens from my home. So I'm learning as we go. So I can just tell you certain things that I've learned by being thrown into this mix. Um, One is I have two older kids who are they're self-sufficient, 12 and almost 16. But then my 7-year-old is not, he's in first grade. So I'm spending 2 hours a day homeschooling him. So what I do is I have to get up early in the morning and I spend an hour and a half, a couple hours. I do my devotional in the morning, check emails, and I get some work done, spend that 2 hours with him. And then I have some of the older kids help out with my son during the day. That's just become a part of their job that all of us sacrifice. And then I have to work on stuff the rest of the day. And then my wife frees up from her teaching and was able to work with him. So the bottom line is we've sat down as a family a couple times and said, okay, how do we make this work? What are the times we're getting really stressed? Let's get into a consistent rhythm. And when we find a rhythm and consistency, when we go to bed, when we get up, then things just fall in place and are a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think that is probably the biggest thing is finding a new rhythm that probably isn't going to last forever, but it's going to last through this crisis moment of school being out. One concern that parents always have is summer slide, and now we're going to a summer that may be 6 months long. And so I think one question that I would have is how do we as parents help our kids to when they go back, they're not so far behind? I know that's a big concern on parents right now is my kid's going to go from third grade to fourth grade or fifth grade to sixth grade, and they didn't have those 3 months, and it's not a normal rhythm. How do we prepare them in the next few months for that time?
Well, one thing is my son's in first grade, and I've talked to some first grade parents that are really kind of freaking out. And I'm like, they're in first grade. They'll be okay. Sometimes there's so much pressure here and all the other kids are in the same boat. So realize the schools will be adapting. Take a deep breath. In the big picture of things, your kid will be okay. So our private school sends lessons and I look at them and I can't do everything they send me. I look at it, I prioritize it. I say I have 2 hours and I just do the best that I can do and live with that. That's just the reality of the new world that we're in. Now, moving into this summer, I would say I would start to prep your kids now if you're afraid they're behind. And you just say, you know what, this summer, we're going to mostly enjoy our summer, but you need to plan on 1 to 2 hours a day. You're going to read a little bit, or we're going to do a little bit of math, or we're going to do a little bit more to have you caught up. I would start to prep the kids now, because if you spring it on them when summer hits, they'll be upset. But if you start to just say, hey, the reality is we've fallen behind a little bit. And to make it happen, I'm going to talk to your teachers next year. I'm going to do some research online. And you know what? 3, 4, maybe 5 days a week, just an hour or two, that's it. You're going to do a little bit this summer. I'm sorry that this doesn't make you happy, but this coronavirus has upset everything. And we have to do our best and be the parent, lay down the law and get them on track if that's what you really feel that they're falling behind.
Good deal. Some parents see this and they just get overwhelmed by everything. And you mentioned that a little bit. Yeah. What encouragement would you have for parents who are just so overwhelmed? They're like, I can't do this. And obviously a lot of stress on jobs and so many other areas of our life. And it's like, I just can't do this. What encouragement would you have for someone who is really struggling with educating their kids at home for the first time?
Well, here would be my encouragement. Don't let the fact that you can't do everything stop you from doing something. So give yourself some grace and just do the best that you can do with the time and resources that you have. And don't beat yourself up with what you can't do, because like me and everybody else I know, there's already enough stress with the change of what's taking place. So I wrote a book called So the Next Generation Will Know. And the very last chapter is love begins. And the idea is if we've given you a ton of ideas in this book, don't feel like you have to do everything. Just do one thing and then do another thing. Just do what you can do and believe that God's grace is good towards you and covers the rest. So don't compare yourself to others. Just do the best that you can do. And then over time, you can make up for it.
That's great. And another area would be discipleship. A lot of folks are trying to balance having some discipleship, maybe some families that they have so much time now, they're thinking we should really do this. And now we have the time to do it. How do they get started and it not be super awkward? You know, we all get our kids in there and we start talking about Jesus. We've never done that before. Sometimes it can be a little awkward in doing that. How do we get started really doing some family discipleship?
That's a great question. I don't sit down and have formal, like, devotional Bible times with my family, like Sunday evenings, 2 hours, dad's teaching out of the Gospel of Mark. I just don't do it that way. Maybe some families do. What I do is one of the blessings out of this coronavirus is we are having family meals almost every single night. We valued that before and tried to, but now we're really kind of doing it every single night. And I just weave in certain things. Like my wife said to me the other night, she said, hey, you're reading Ecclesiastes. Can you share something you've learned with your kids? And I share it with my kids. So I try to bring it up naturally and go, you know, at a mealtime, a parent could say, hey, I've been reading the Gospel of Mark, and kids, I just want to share with you one lesson I've learned that's really meaningful to me. And then you move on. Another thing you can do is you can say, hey, I saw this in the news. There's this story about, you know, whatever issue it is. And throw it out there to your kids and go, hey, what do you think? What would you say? What's a Christian response? And you just get your kids talking about it. You might say to your kids something like this, say, hey, there's a lot of fear right now. Biblically, how do you think we should respond to fear? And you just listen and you talk to them about it. And here's another tool. I actually just started a YouTube channel. And I've had the YouTube channel for a while, but in partnership with Biola Apologetics, we're being very strategic in giving resources to people. So last week, I just interviewed Lee Strobel on the evidence for the resurrection. And I had a lot of parents who tuned in and watched it with their kids and talked to them about it. We actually are interviewing somebody in 2 weeks coming up who's written an unbelievable book where she worked with the father of Timothy McVeigh, who was the Oklahoma City bomber, and the father of one of the girls who was a victim from that bombing. And because of their Christian faith, they reconciled their relationship back together. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but not this week coming up, but the next week is the 25th anniversary, for lack of a better term, of the Oklahoma City bombing. Well, why not watch a movie with your kids on Netflix about the Oklahoma City bombing? I watched one, I thought it was interesting, and say, you know what? This interview is coming up about these two dads who reconciled amidst this. And you know, we're going to carve out time and we're just going to watch it and we're going to talk about it as a family. That's a practical thing that you can do. And a lot of parents have done that. So you're right, it takes time and it can feel awkward, but if you're intentional about it, and you commit to overtime and you just take one step at a time, those are some very practical things that you can do.
That's awesome. And just to kind of hone in on that, you know, as leaders, sometimes we talk about terminology calling clarify the win. You know, what is winning? And this is an area that's obviously very subjective. It's hard to determine. And what I find is parents get frustrated and they go, you know, if I'm not doing the ecclesiastical Bible study with them, I don't feel like I'm winning. What would a win be? How do we clarify that for families in this area of family discipleship?
So here's a win. Improve what you're doing with one step. That's it. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Do one positive step forward to be better at discipling your kids. Then in 6 weeks, do another step. And then in 6 weeks, do another step. That's it. So anybody who's watching this already cares enough about discipling their kids, or they wouldn't be spending their time on this conversation. Just ask yourself, how can I more efficiently use meals? How can I use our free time as a family maybe once a week to watch a meaningful movie and talk about it? what are practical things that I can do to start moving the ball forward with our kids? That's how I define a win. It's really that simple.
How would you say, as a Christian educator, we could combine the two issues of discipleship and education while we're in the home, to where maybe it's not just compartmentalized one or the other? How could we kind of blend those two things in, where we're leveraging education, doing what the school's asked us to do, or at least to some extent doing it, and then also adding in some Christian values, Christian worldview to that?
Well, I think Deuteronomy 6:4 is the key, where it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love Lord God with your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. And teach these things to your kids as you walk on the road, as you lie down, as you wake up." In other words, talk about spiritual things throughout the rhythm of life. So we can teach worldview if our kids are in a Christian school and they're sending that, but don't make that be the only time you talk about spiritual things. Do over the dinner table, weave it in. When you're tucking a kid in at night, weave it in. If you're watching a movie, give a little insight and weave it in. Look for times outside of that distinct educational component to show that your faith informs everything that you do. That would be the approach to it. I'll tell you something I did with my son. I don't know if parents will want to do it or not. He's 15. He goes, "Hey, Dad, I think you should get on TikTok." And this is a new app where people make these 1-minute videos or less. And there's silly videos and funny videos. And I said, "Sure, I'll do it with you." And I did a couple videos showing how many superhero shirts that I have. I did one showing, trying to make a bunch of basketball shots in a row, like fun videos. But I also use, and I release some on 5 arguments for the existence of God in 1 minute, 3 proofs Jesus rose from the grave. And so we're having fun on TikTok filming these together, but I'm also weaving in some spiritual ones so he sees that I'm trying to use this platform for good. Now, if you don't feel comfortable and don't want to use social media, don't use it. I'm just giving you an example of something that worked for me, that my son was interested in, that I could go where kids are hanging out now and reach them. And with my son, we could build this relationship. I did a video with a neighbor and it has over 160,000 views. It kind of shocked me. And it's just fun that my son and I are kind of tracking this and just doing it together. And I'm weaving in spiritual things while we're on TikTok. That's it. So look for natural things in the rhythm of life to build in spiritual truths.
It's like that you have a TikTok now. Now, what is the answer to the question of how many superhero shirts that you have?
Oh, come on. That's a softball question, man.
You're going to be a lot.
You're going to have to watch my TikTok video and subscribe.
I'm going to watch that. That is great. I don't think I've ever seen you not in a superhero. Are they all Marvel? That's the other question I had. Are they all Marvel?
No.
Some DC?
Look, I've got much more than just Marvel. I've got some DC, Star Wars stuff. I've got a range.
Got range. That's good to know. Just final moments. What last thoughts do you have for parents? Again, they're balancing this crazy time out, trying to do the best they can with their kids. What are some final thoughts that you would have for those families that are beginning to get started in discipleship, managing a lot of things, creating a new rhythm? Some final thoughts for them.
So I did a YouTube video because through this coronavirus, there's been one big message that kind of God has laid on my heart. Because a lot of people are living in fear. Fear is selfish. The number one fear that Americans had before this virus craziness was public speaking, because we're afraid we're going to look at us and we look bad. 1 John 4:18 says, "Perfect love casts out fear," because fear is selfish, but love is selfless. So my encouragement to parents is to say, with your kids, ask them, how can we love those around us? How can we love those around us? So I took my son over to visit a teacher friend of ours who's single and he's living alone. We just went over to talk to him 45 minutes. It was fun. Didn't take a lot of time. And we came back. My son's like, "Gosh, I'm really glad we did that." Our neighbors, we called our neighbors and said, "Can we get you groceries?" And we picked up groceries for him, wipe them all down and bring it to him. My son sees me on YouTube trying to put out content out there, trying to encourage and bless people during this. So just start by saying, how can we love those around us? And have your kids see you do that, include them in it, That's discipleship. I mean, amidst all the bad stuff that's come from this, we have an opportunity to love our neighbors, which is exactly what Jesus calls us to do. Now, I go into more depth. I did about an 8-minute video. Only if it's helpful. On YouTube, it was like, don't live in fear, follow this verse. And I released it earlier this week. So if parents are hearing this going, okay, I want to know, what does this look like? What does this Bible passage teach? Maybe watch with your kids. That's a really simple thing to do. And that video is on there only if it's helpful. But that's what we try to do, is I'm trying to teach my kids, this is an opportunity to love those around us, because there's a lot of people hurting.
Yeah, so just resources real quick. What's your YouTube video, and what are some resources that you guys have that parents can look up?
Sure, here's 2 for you. So the YouTube channel is Dr. Sean McDowell, and it's in partnership with Biola Apologetics. And we have some amazing interviews coming up. People like Os Guinness, Stephen Meyer, some of the leading Christian thinkers in the world. And in fact, this Wednesday will be Natasha Crane, and she is probably the expert on how do you talk to your kids about Jesus. That'll be Wednesday night coming up, and you can listen in live and ask questions. It'll be 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, so I don't know if that's 6 or 7, wherever you're at on Wednesday night. That's a resource you can watch, and we will be talking about how do you practically do this in the home and taking live questions from people. So that's a resource. The book I wrote is called So the Next Generation Will Know, and it's basically home discipleship, practical ideas. And it's not a list of like, you got to spend an hour a week doing this. The goal is just to help people think differently about how they parent and disciple, and see the opportunities that are right there in front of them if they'll just open up their eyes. So that's called So the Next Generation Will Know.
Those are great resources. We'll post those as well. That way people can help find them. Hey, thanks for your time today. By the way, how's your dad doing?
My dad's doing well. Thanks for asking. He's holed up at home, but he is not letting it stop him. He is probably inactive and is motivated, reaching people as ever. So he's doing great. Thank you for asking, Joey. And good work with the church. I hope this is an encouragement.
It's huge. So thank you so much. You guys have a good day.
You got it. Blessings.